Okay, here we go from the national headquarters of RT America in our nation's capital. Hello again, everybody. I'm Rick Sanchez. So I want to start with something that's, I think, somewhat unique as I get that out of the way. There is a wonderful expression that is most perfect to begin our newscast today. It's an old American idiom that goes like this: we just can't seem to leave well enough alone. What is well enough that we can't seem to leave alone these days? And by we, I'm referring to us, America, right? The answer to that is best captured last night. I don't know if you watched last night. I'm sure you did, because I know most of you watch us every night, which we appreciate. So we had our guest on the air, John Jordan, right? And when I asked him, this is really fascinating the way this whole sequence of events goes down. So I asked John Jordan yesterday about the situation in Syria, and he said these words.
It's the end of the Syrian civil war, it certainly looks like. The end of hostilities, hard to know, because you still have a lot of actors and a lot of interests that have been fighting in and among Syria in the context of this multi-party conflict. You still have Iranian forces there. You still have their loggerheads with Israel, and there still could be conflict between Israel and Iran in Syria. Idlib was 3.5 million people holed up there. Everybody thought there was going to be a big offensive, a big bloodbath. It turned out it was real estate that people wanted to own, but nobody wanted to pay for. And that's a really good thing. But it looks like that part of the conflict in Syria is winding down.
The conflict is winding down, the end of the civil war. Those are his words, right? And as I heard him say those words, there was almost like this uneasy feeling that almost came over me as I was listening to my friend John Jordan, because I'm so used to hearing when we talk about Syria that the next word is chaos, war, death, attacks, chemical gas explosions. So when I heard him say that, hostilities in Syria seem to be coming to an end, the civil war may be over, I thought it sounded almost weird. And I actually thought to myself that I wish he had not said it. I didn't say it to him, but I actually thought to myself, as I was hearing him say that, I thought, boy, I hope he doesn't jinx this thing. Well, wouldn't you know? Just around the time that Mr. Jordan was saying that, this report was handed to me by one of our producers from the Russian general that's assigned to Syria, saying that his troops had taken some prisoners who told the Russians about a plan to fake chemical attacks and then blame it on the Assad government. You get that? That there's already a plan to fake chemical attack and blame it on Assad. Why? Well, let me continue, because this gets even more curious. Almost as if on cue, we then monitored this report that came in lickety-split from CNN, quoting a State Department warning about the fact that Assad was about to or has already used chemical weapons in recent days. So here you have the United States of America saying, oh no, not so fast there, John Jordan. You know what? Nope, chemical weapons scare again. So it's hard not to ask the following question, right? It's what we do, we ask questions, right? Is this about sabotaging peace? Is there really a chemical attack? Is there proof that one is imminent? And if that's the case, where's the proof? Do we take the State Department at its word without questioning? And here's maybe the most important part of this when it comes to the questions that we need to ask. What is their track record with this type of thing? Finally, is it possible that we can simply not leave well enough alone? This is the News with Rick Sanchez, where we drill down on this, because if we don't, who will, right? And we truly do believe it's time to do news again. We're going to begin tonight with this story, right? And really, it's about what the story really is. Because we do a TV newscast here. We're not a newspaper, right? We're not a magazine. We're not radio. So what should we do for you? I want to show you video, let you see for yourself, not just tell you what the real story is in a place like Syria. In this era where we're going through stories half the time discussed as processes instead of facts, politics instead of what's actually happening on the ground, I want you to know that for the people of the country, The people in Syria, it's not a process, it's not politics for them. You know what this is? When you got a bomb staring down at you in the middle of the night, this is life and death. Watch. That's the bombing. These are the children. This is the reality of what is going on in Syria. And it's tough to watch. It's been tough for the whole world to watch for years now. But there it is. And the pictures tell the story. Imagine living in that. That is the reality of Syria. You know, at the time of the Spanish-American War, the most highly decorated Marine Corps general in the history of the United States at the time was a guy named Smedley Butler. Cool name, huh? General Smedley Butler. He said at the time, this is a quote, "War is a racket. It is the only one in which the profits are counted in dollars and the losses are counted in lies." Good-looking guy, right? Joining us now, News with Rick Sanchez, special correspondent Michele Greenstein, who's been working on this story for us today. That quote is 100 years old, and I bet you, just based on the way this story seems to read, that the quote still holds true today.
You could certainly say that. I mean, by and large, people want peace. The American people are no different. So when you want to sell a war to someone, the best thing to do is to give it, of course, a humanitarian narrative. Now, that narrative that we've seen most of all in Syria is that the Syrian government uses chemical weapons on its own citizens. This is not something new. This is no different than Gaddafi being a brutal dictator or Saddam Hussein letting babies die on the cold, hard floor. I'm glad you asked about the track record. Let's talk about the history of these alleged chemical weapons attacks by the Syrian government. 2013. The Obama administration said that the Syrian government used sarin gas. Now, I'm going to tell you a story, and I'm going to intentionally use Western sources to tell my story because anything other than that gets discredited by the West as fake news. So, Seymour Hersh, Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. One of the
best journalists in the history of our country.
Exactly, one of my personal heroes, in fact, said that the Obama administration cherry-picked evidence to come to the conclusion that the Syrian government was responsible and ignored the fact that the opposition had access to sarin. 2017, as you know, Trump launched a missile strike that again was justified by a chemical attack by the Syrian government. And Hersh again launched an exhaustive investigation, and he called the claim that the Syrian government did this a quote-unquote fairy tale. Now, the most recent one was April of 2018. This happened in Douma. We were told that the U.S. had evidence, solid proof that Syria used chemical weapons on Douma, although most of this quote-unquote proof did come from social media posts from the White Helmets. But even General Mattis, 2 days before the Trump administration launched missiles to Syria, said that there was no evidence. Now, Robert Fisk, another Western source, the Middle East correspondent for The Independent, visited Douma, and he was unable to find any witnesses to corroborate this story. And even a well-known BBC reporter had this to say in February.
After almost 6 months of investigations, I can prove without a doubt that the Douma hospital scene was staged. No fatalities occurred in the hospital.
Wow. Now, at this point, the strike had already happened, right?
Yeah.
That weapons contractor stock went up, the damage had been done, and those people were hurt. Now, this alleged chemical weapons factory, what was it really? Well, Syrian media say that it was actually a research institute for cancer drugs, which makes this extra sad because Western sanctions prohibit cancer medications to go to Syria. Here's what the director of that research institute said. He said, if there were chemical weapons, we would not be able to stand here. I've been here since 5:30 a.m. in full health. I'm not coughing. Now, I'm sure you're wondering that the OPCW actually concluded this past March that the Syrian government was responsible for Douma. So what's up with that, right? The OPCW said that cylinders with chlorine had passed through the ceiling into facilities, and that, of course, backs the claim that the government was responsible because this was a rebel-held town, so it must have come from the air. But just this week, a leaked memo actually from OPCW engineers calls that assessment into question. Let's take a listen. There's a higher probability that both cylinders were manually placed at those two locations rather than being delivered from aircraft. So according to this memo, the people on the ground, the opposition, was responsible, which is the opposite conclusion of the official OPCW report. So why the conflict? I mean, we don't really know, but it's possible that there was, of course, political pressure.
So what I'm getting from you, and I think as people listen to this, and I know it's a little bit of a long litany with a lot of incidents, and we certainly appreciate your thoroughness on this, is that whenever we see aggressions, and whenever we see an act of aggression, we should look to see who's being incentivized by not only the aggression, but the story that leads to the aggression.
Yes.
And in this case, if we ask questions, we're left going, who's making money here?
Well, I'll say this, incentives. Who does this hurt when the Syrian government, launches chemical attacks onto its own people? It hurts Syria. It invites strikes from the West. Who does it help? It helps the U.S., it helps Israel, it helps those who want to overthrow the Syrian government.
And the big corporations who make money on the weapons that are
used. Who have
used.
Huge partnerships with our government representatives.
And these are
Absolutely.
simply questions that need to be asked. It's why we do it, and we wish others would join us in doing the same thing.
Agreed.
Well done, Michele.
Thank you.
I'm Rick Sanchez. You found us on YouTube, and that's awesome. But you know what? I'm also live every night at 7 and 8 p.m. Eastern on DirecTV and Dish and cable and satellite, the RT app, and Pluto TV. I'll see you there.